A blessed and a wonderful Sunday to everyone. We are in the first Sunday of the month, and as usual, I'm going to introduce to you a new series entitled Different Seasons, Same God. Different seasons, same God. There are different seasons in life. You know, when you go to the northern part of the world, they have 4 seasons. When you are there during December, January, and February, it's usually the winter season. It's when the snow would fall. And the surroundings would turn white, especially when you are in Canada, America, and Europe, and some parts of Asia like Japan. But when the month of March comes, the snow would begin to melt, and beautiful flowers would come out as well. So that's March, April, and May. But during June, July, August, that's a summer season for those countries. And the temperature turns so hot during those months. But after August, September, October, November would come, it's autumn, wherein you would see plants and trees becoming very colorful. But that's not the way we have it in the Philippines. In our country, we only have the dry season and the rainy season. But it's a bit unpredictable this time because even if it's in the month of April and May, rain still happens. So it becomes very unpredictable. If you go to the southern part of the globe like Australia, it's a bit different from those that are in the north because during December, January, February, that's their summer. It's very hot in those places. But when it's June, July, August, it's their winter, opposite with the one in Canada. But seasons within the year are very predictable. It depends on the month. So if you live in America and you are in the month of June, you know that it's going to be summer every year. When you are in Australia and it's in the month of June, you know that it's going to be winter. So it's predictable. Seasons for every country. But I am going to talk about seasons of life. Seasons of life come randomly. There are different seasons in our lives, and these seasons would come usually unexpected. And what is harder with it, because when we talk about seasons of life, sometimes there are 2-3 different seasons that would come together, and it's hard to address them. When I say seasons of life, it could be a season of drought financially. It could be a season of difficult times in your relationships with the people around you. It could be a season that brings an emotional struggle. There are different seasons in life, and they come randomly. And sometimes they come simultaneously. This morning, we will be talking about season of trials. And don't you know that season of trials in life, as I have said, they are unpredictable. They come randomly. Sometimes our lives are flowing smoothly when suddenly there is an incident that would bring us to a moment that we would feel as if we are dying. That's why we are surprised by it. Nobody can predict about seasons in life. One may feel so great today, and sooner or later they found out that their house is burned to ashes. One may be feeling so smooth and well this moment, and yet suddenly there was a heart attack. That's why people would say, I was with him yesterday, but now he is in the hospital. Seasons in life may come very randomly, and sometimes we find ourselves having difficulties in dealing with them, especially season of trials. Let us learn from the book of Psalm this morning, particularly the 56th Psalm, Psalm 56, verses 1 to 13. And we will be learning from the season of trials in the life of David. So let's open our Bibles in that particular text, Psalm 56, verses 1 to 13. It says here, "Be gracious to me, O God, for man has trampled upon me. Fighting all day long, he oppresses me. My foes have trampled upon me all day long. For they are many who fight proudly against me. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, in God, whose word I praise. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can mere man do to me? All day long they distort my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They attack, they lurk, they watch my steps, as they have waited to take my life. Because of wickedness, cast them forth. In anger, put down the peoples, O God. You have taken account of my wanderings. Put my tears in your battle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise. In the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? Your vows are binding upon me, O God. I will render thank offerings to you, for you have delivered my soul from death, indeed my feet from stumbling, so that I may walk before God in the light of the living." May the good Lord bless the reading of His word. There is a word that became very popular in our time today. Now, it's an old word. A word, an adjective that describes about someone who does not react to things, someone who seemingly does not care, someone who does not mind about the things that are happening around. The new generation is very acquainted with that word, and that word is nonchalant. Have you heard that word? If you have children, you must have heard that word already. Nonchalant. Nonchalant. This is a word that is describing a person who doesn't seem to care, who does not respond or react to things that are happening around. And I suspect that this became very popular because this became very rampant in our time. Why? Because of gadgets. When individuals are into their gadget, as if they forget about the realities happening around them. Sometimes they seem to care, but they really don't. When something happens, they take out their gadgets and they video and take photos. Do they care? Not really. They just seem to care because they give their attention, not because they really care, but because they want to take some photos and videos and that they could upload it in their social media. But this word is very powerful. When we think of this reality happening around us today, there are a lot of individuals who became nonchalant because we become so busy of this handheld gadget that we have. While this is true with the people surrounding us, and this is so discouraging to think about this reality, praise be unto God, because this is never a reality with our God. When we are in a great problem, when we experience a season of trials in life, we can be assured that our God is not nonchalant. He cares. This is exactly what David was trying to convey through this song. You know what? When you look at the first stanza, this song has two stanzas and one that serves like a chorus of the song. Verses 1 to 4 is the first stanza. Verses 5 to 8 is the second stanza. And then 9 to 13 serves as like a chorus of the song. So we'll look at the first stanza. It says here, "Be gracious to me, O God, For man has trampled upon me, fighting all day long, he oppresses me. My foes have trampled upon me all day long, for they are many who fight proudly against me. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you, in God whose word I praise, in God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid what can mere man do to me. In the first two verses, he presented a problem that David was experiencing in life that was seemingly so heavy for him to go through. Take note that in verse 1, there was a description of an adversary in a singular form. When you look at verse 1, he said here, "For man has trampled upon me, fighting all day long. He oppresses me." Take note of the word he. He oppresses me. But when you look at verse 2, there was a shift from a singular enemy to a plural form of adversary. When he said, "My foes have trampled upon me." What was he talking about here? Now we will have a better understanding of what David was going through if we go back to the background story of this song. The song was most likely written during the time when David struggled against Saul and against the armies of Achish. A time came in the life of David that he struggled a lot. It was a season of trials for him when Saul, the king of Israel, started desiring to kill him. When did it happen? Well, this desire of Saul started when the people of Israel attributed greatness to David in a greater sense than the greatness of Saul. After David slew Goliath, they went back to Jerusalem, and then the people shouted, "Here comes Saul, who slew his thousands," in the book of 1 Samuel, "and David, who slew his tens of thousands." When Saul heard these words, he started thinking, this guy received a greater attribution than me, when in fact I am the king over Israel. If I would let this thing happen, if I would just allow this thing to grow in the presence of this guy, he might take my throne someday. And so beginning at that time, Saul started thinking, I have to put an end to this. And so Saul began finding some ways to take the life of David away. He threw a spear at him. He devised plans to kill him many times. And these attempts of Saul became a season of trials for David. And because of that, David had to escape several times. And when he could not take any longer what Saul was doing to him, David decided to go out of the territory of Saul. So he made a decision to cross the borders of Israel, to go out of it and step on the land of the Philistines. You cannot escape from the hands of Saul when you remain in his territory, because he was the king of Israel. So in verse 1 of this psalm, in the first stanza, when there was a singular form of describing his enemy, he was actually thinking about Saul. But in verse 2, there is now a plural description of his enemies, the foes that he had. When he stepped out of the boundary of Israel, he went to the place of the Philistines. What David did to Goliath became very known to the neighboring countries. And beginning at that time, they started seeking to take his life as well. So when David left the territory of Saul, going to the territory of the Philistines, he encountered the armies of Achish, King Achish. When they saw him, they wanted his life as well. That's why David started describing that his foes are many. He was now facing no longer Saul, but the armies of Achish. And the only thing that David thought of for him to escape this threat, he pretended to be a crazy man. While he was there at the gate of the city, he started writing on the wall without anything. Kana bitong tao nga magsulat-sulat nga wa kay makita, kabalo na ka og unsa na. When a person would begin to catch insects without any insect around, kabalo na ka og unsay nahitabo. And David let his saliva flow through even his beard. So when the armies of Achish attempted to take his life, Achish told them, "Leave this guy alone. Don't you see he is crazy? We have a lot of fools in my land already. Why would you add one more in the person of David? You leave him alone." That's why they stopped attempting to take his life because according to Achish, he's a fool. He's crazy. You leave him alone. While reflecting on these incidents, David had a great man in the person of Saul as his enemy. He had the armies of Achish as his enemies. That's why he said here, when you look at verses 1 and 2, "Fighting all day long, he oppresses me," because Saul never stopped running after him. And then verse 2, "My foes have trampled upon me all day long, for they are many who fight proudly against me." This kind of trials that David experienced is something that our trials of our time cannot surpass. When there is the greatest person in the land who seeks to kill you, and you tried to escape, you ended up in the place of people who desired to get your life as well. And anywhere he went to, they tried to chase him. And the only solution that he had in mind was to pretend that he was crazy. Have you experienced this kind of resolution? That you had a problem and the only way of escape is to pretend that you are crazy? Wala pa naman siguro sa atin ang naka-experience nito. But this was a time, a season of trials in the life of David. And I want us to take note of this. When did this season come? This season came after a season of victory. When you experience victories in life, do not slacken your guards, my friends. Because this kind of season may come in our life when it is very unpredictable. That's why we say to ourselves, "I was just doing this and it just came. It dawned to me that I have a big problem now." Why? Because the season of trials will come randomly. And what is difficult sometimes, they come randomly and it is a simultaneous attack from different enemies and different aspects of life. David had it. And so his resolution when he had these problems, it is found in the second part of the first stanza when he said, "When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can mere man do to me?" He started managing his fear of the people around him to the fear of the Lord. Because for David to stand properly in the sight of God, to be resilient, you know what? This is one thing that you and I had to learn. The season of trials can be a season of resilience for Christians. Take note of that. The season of trials, when they come, it can be translated into a season of resilience. But take note that resilience in the Christian context may be a bit different from resilience from the worldly context. Because from the worldly perspective, resilience can just mean that you stand despite the many trials that may come. Sometimes people who are worldly, they would resolve to lie. They will resolve to step on someone's life. They would resolve to engage into corrupt transactions just for them to stay afloat. That's resilience in worldly context. But for Christians, That's not how resilience is understood. Because for a Christian to be resilient, we don't only remain standing, but we don't step on someone else's life. We don't resolve doing a lie. We don't resolve transacting with a transaction that is morally wrong. For Christians to be resilient, we have to consider that we remain morally upright in the eyes of God, even in the midst of trials. And that can only happen when you and I would have the fear of the Lord in a greater sense than the fear of man. That's why David had to remind himself. Yes, he acknowledged, he recognized that he was in a season of trials, but he converted that season of trials in a season of resilience by fearing God, remaining standing, and at the same time remaining morally upright. Maybe he realized that what he did, pretending to be fool, was not right after all. And then after these experiences, he wrote this song reflecting that he should have trusted God, and he expressed this time, the time of writing, that I shall trust God more than fearing man. The second stanza led us to a deeper emotional state of David. Beginning with verses 5 and 6, he said this line, all day long they distort my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They attack, they lurk, they watch my steps as they have waited to take my life. This is what is mentioned in the other part of the scriptures that says, the enemy is like a roaring lion, trying to wait for an opportunity to devour a believer. And that was the reality in the life of David. They were just waiting, lurking for a moment, an opportunity that they could find in order for them to destroy him. And they started that with his words. People who have evil intention against someone would be willing to distort the words of the person, break the testimony of the person just to bring him down. David went through this. But what was the resolution of David? This is a very heart-touching part of the text. When David said, because of wickedness, cast them forth. In anger, put them down, the peoples, O God. Listen very carefully to this line. You have taken account of my wanderings. Put my tears in your battle, and are they not in your book? I want us to take note of that line. Put my tears in your battle. What does it mean by that? David was surrounded by people who desired to take his life away. Their evil intentions were always there against him, and David resolved to stand in a right manner in front of God, believing that God could save him. But in this time, as he believed in God, you know what he went through? There were a lot of tears falling from his eyes. No wonder this psalm, if you look at your NIV Bible, there is a superscript or title in that psalm. In the NIV, there is like a title that says, for the director of music, to the tune of a dove on distant oaks of David, a miktam, when the Philistines had seized him in Gath. Now take note of the word miktam. That word is related or associated with a Hebrew language that means to say, to close your mouth. Meaning you don't say anything. What is the significance of that in relation to what David was going through? Have you experienced in life that you felt so down that your tears were falling from your eyes and that your throat is as if it's already clogged with something, with like a vacuum that you could no longer speak even a single word because of your emotional distress, and that your tears were just falling and flowing from your eyes? If you are a human being at your normal state, you have gone through that. Yung umiiyak ka, you were sobbing, and you cannot say a word anymore. And miktam is something like you are praying at that moment, crying out to the Lord without a single word, because in your heart and mind, you are communicating with God wordless. But you get to connect with the Lord because He reads your heart and your mind. That moment when you cannot say a single word anymore, and yet you take the assurance that God listens to your appeal. I want us to take note of that line when He said, "Put my tears in your battle." That battle, a garapa, a container. This is an idiomatic expression that is usually used by the ancient writers. Put my tears in your battle. It creates an image that a person is really carrying a heavy burden in his life, a trial that he cannot surpass, a trial that he cannot finish, a trial that he cannot carry. And the only thing that he does is that cry to the Lord, and it presents a picture of a holy God coming into the presence of that person, bringing a battle, and God placing that battle at the cheek of the person, taking every tear from the eyes of the person. And when that idiom is said, David is actually appealing to God, telling Him, "Lord, I know that you see every tear that falls from my eyes, and I know that you care. I know that you care not only for my victories, I know that you care when I am burdened. I know that you care when I am tired. I know that you care when I am in pain. I know that you care when I am struggling. I know that you gather my tears in your battle." It is really comforting to think that we are serving not a nonchalant God. It is comforting to think that we serve a God who cares. Who cares not only when we are victorious, who cares not only when things are well, but more than that, it is comforting to think when we feel and experience that God cares when we are at the lowest point of our life. That's a beautiful picture that was painted by David here. We have the God who cares even when we are in pain. No wonder when you look at the resolution of this part, David said he resolved to trust God because he knew that He cares. You look at the chorus part of this song in verses 9 to 13, all were thanksgiving, all were praises, all were adoration about God. Why? Because David knew as he appealed to God, he was appealing to someone who cares for him. God cares. If you read verses 9 to 13, then my enemies will turn back in that day when I call. This I know that God is for me. In God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise. In God I have put my trust, I shall not be afraid. What can men do to me? Your vows are binding upon me, O God. I will render thanks offerings to you, for you have delivered my soul from death, indeed my feet from stumbling, so that I may walk before God in the light of the living. This is what he said, appreciating the God who cares. You know, sometimes we feel that God is nonchalant, but that's not the reality. God cares. And if we make an appeal before Him with this mindset, it is the only moment that we become resilient even in the season of trials. Because a season of trials can be converted into a season of resilience. That can happen in your life when we come to God, depending on Him and knowing that He cares for us. One of the very profound images that I would like to relate with you was an experience when my first child was born. The doctor of the hospital was a friend of ours. And so when my wife was brought into the operating room, she asked me, "Pastor, Can you manage yourself seeing blood and these things during surgery? And I told her, I think I can manage. And so I was allowed inside while she performed the operation. I saw the inner part of my wife. I saw the little girl inside. When she was lifted up from the womb of her mom, she was lifeless. She was as pale as a paper. And then the doctor started patting her butt, tickling her back. And I was alarmed after several seconds that she wasn't responding. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't crying. But a few seconds more, she began to cry. It brought a smile on my face because it was a cry of life, a symbol that there is life in her. But the problem was she continued crying. She kept on crying. And I saw the attempt of the doctor and the nurses to pacify her. But she kept crying until she was placed at the chest of her mom. By the time her skin touched the skin of her mom, she stopped crying right away. And I said, wow, what a fascinating connection between a child and a mother. There must be something with the skin of her mom that when she felt it, she felt secured. She felt that she is in a good hands. She felt that she is safe. That must be the feeling of every child of God when we come to Him. Because when we are in the presence of God, even when we are in the season of trials, we can feel that we are secured. We can feel that we are safe. We can feel that we will be provided with that hope that we could see in the presence of the Almighty One. We can be safe and we can be assured of that. Let us come into the presence of God with that understanding. Because as I have said earlier, we worship, we serve not a nonchalant God. We worship and serve someone who cares for us, most especially when we are at the lowest point of life. When we come to God with that mindset, a season of trials can be converted into a season of resilience when we trust God that He cares for us. With that in our hearts and minds, let it be so. Because I don't know what trials you are in right now. I don't know if you are in that kind of season. But I tell you, this kind of season comes randomly. And usually, we are caught unaware and not expecting about them. They just come. But when they come, never forget that you have the God who cares for you. God bless you all, and good morning.